Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar covering Maximo Start Centers and their portlets. My name is Betsy Ambrosius, and along with me leading our webinar is Chris Winston, one of Projetech's project managers. Today, Chris will dive into all things related to Start Centers and portlets in Maximo, which will include report object structure, introduction of default application with default query, result sets, and more. Before I turn it over to Chris, just some reminders. This webinar will be recorded and all phone lines have been muted. We will be sending out the recording by the end of the week, and we'll be answering all questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your question in the field box. Also, Chris has made the slide deck available in the handout section on your screen for your convenience. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Chris.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to look at, again, as Betsy mentioned, Start Centers and things related to them. I don't know if I can fit that in an hour, but I'm going to give it a shot. The focus is going to be on Maximo 7.6 and some enhancements therein. There's a URL here that's available for you. I actually did test this out yesterday. It does still work. That'll take you into videos that were set up for 7.5, which will take you a little bit deeper into each individual portlet. So what I'm really going to focus on here more so is some of the enhancements that have been put in and made available since then. All right, let's get going. My first webinar. So we'll see how this goes. Here's our agenda. There's a lot here to cover. One thing that comes up is, what if you're not going to use a Start Center, you want something else, you want to set up a default application? I'll deal with that first in terms of demonstrating it, and then we'll deal with the actual Start Centers, their portlets, navigation. I want to talk about Everyplace because there's an Everyplace Start Center you need to consider as well, since the Everyplace functionality is delivered with Maximo 7.6. It's part of the core product now. I'll show you some samples. It'll be here, and then you, of course, will be able to download or have downloaded them in the handouts, and then we'll actually get into a demonstration within Maximo. So, for example, here at a client, I'll show you how this is actually set up. They operated a lot in a single application. Several of their users didn't use a Start Center. They went straight to the application. We set that up with default queries so that when they got there, they saw the things they needed to see, not every piece of data in the application, and it didn't start out empty. And that's what this functionality allows you to do. Each individual user can specify a default application that they would launch into when they get into Maximo. In addition, they can specify default query that would run when I launch that application. So this then gets them into the application they want to log into at first, gets them into the query and see the records they want to see. We'll take a look at that in the demonstration. In general, around Start Centers, Start Centers are set up and tied to a security group and is effectively the home page for Maximo. As a consequence, in cases where you have multiple security groups attached to your profile, then you have the potential to see multiple Start Centers. They'll just display as tabs, generally alphabetically, left to right, and then there's a display control that allows you to pick one of those as your default, and as a mobile, and we'll talk about that in a bit. The portlets themselves, there's quite a bit of them, but essentially it's roughly these 6. Technically there'll be 8 on the list. The bulletin board is for messages. The workflow inbox, if you're using workflow, it'll take all your workflows and route into one place if you are a person inside the workflow. KPI appear as list or as graph. Graphs take up more space, and that's really the only big thing you need to take into consideration when you're laying out your Start Center. More importantly, they live at organization level. So if you have different KPIs for different sites, you need to make sure that the structured query language for the KPI incorporates that. KPI templates can give you some greater flexibility there. and we'll probably have a webinar on that sometime in the spring. Quick insert and favorites or just application shortcuts saves you a little bit, and you can use that as well. Report lists. So report lists allow you to actually place a report on the Start Center as an icon. So we click on it and the report will run. So you'll see the little skull and crossbones there because you need to make sure that your report has parameters either embedded, those that pop up at runtime, or both, so that your report doesn't run away and that it does actually give you useful data as opposed to nothing at all or everything. Both are bad. One's just worse than the other. So that's just something to keep in mind when you choose what reports will be available from the Start Center. Result sets, probably the greatest flexibility. Essentially, a query that you run in an application. The list of records can be presented on the Start Center. You've got greater flexibility in the result set and the fact that you can add additional columns. With the advent of the report object structure, you can pull in columns from other tables as long as it's part of the structure, and present it on the Start Center. If you wanted to change the column alignment on an application, then you're talking about an application designer change, of course, which then changes it for everyone using the application. Start Center result set will be tied to the group, and individuals in the group can make their own changes, but if they pull in the base template from the database to overlay what they've done, then they've got to start over. So that's just something to keep in mind. I've also put some video lists for KPIs, this is here as well, that give you some more details around KPIs until we get to the point where we're going to cover that in the webinar as well. Alrighty. Real estate's often an issue, how much space is available in the Start Center. Since we probably won't be getting that 42-inch plasma that we want, then we have to make decisions around what is actually displayed on the Start Center, preferably to avoid both vertical and horizontal scrolling. So what you put on the Start Center depends on the audience. I'd love to give you hard and fast rules that tell you exactly which is more important, which is less, but it really doesn't work that way. But there are some guidelines you can keep in mind. Workflow inbox, if you're not using workflow, you don't need it. If you are using workflow, then for those people who are assignees in the workflow, this should be at the top. So it's kind of an all or nothing. It either goes at the top or it doesn't go anywhere at all. If they are in a PR, a PO, an invoice, a PM, and a work order workflows. We've got 5 workflows and they're all in them. One workflow inbox is all you need. Each record, when routed to them, can then appear in one spot. So you don't need 5 workflow inboxes for 5 workflows, you just need one. But if you have at least one in use and that group is involved in the workflow, you do need to put that right on top. Second to that, I would say result sets, but again, result sets are most useful to line personnel, typically assignees that are updating transactions, labor, material, usage or receipts, services, inventory transactions. Those are probably the more common things that are going to be presented as result sets, and those would be those users, and they would tend to get a higher priority and position on the Start Center. That, again, is very subjective. Some people don't need that. Sometimes they need more higher level detail, like a key performance indicator. Some aggregation, either in list or graphic format. I would recommend list first before graphics simply because of the real estate that's taken. But if you need to see the speedometer type graph or a bar, if you're going to combine multiple KPIs, which you can do, that functionality is there and available. It's, again, list does not take up much space. The graph takes up more space, and you'll see that as we go through some sample Start Centers. Reports, sorry about the syntax, IFF, if and only if that report is needed and that report is parameterized. That is, the report has parameters that are going to appear at runtime, they're already embedded, or both. Then you can consider putting that report on the Start Center. If either one of those things are invalid, then you just don't put it up there. And that's really the guideline around that decision. Quick insert and favorites, debatable. Generally, they save you a hover and 1 to 2 clicks, but if it's something that you're commonly in, then that's it. Go ahead and put it there. Particularly in cases where of the 140 or 150 applications stored in Maximo, you've got a group of users that use 5. It's probably not going to matter. When you do have a large number of applications that are being used in a group, then yeah, the quick insert and favorites can be very helpful. You also have recent applications. That's something that's new for 7.6. So as people are using, they'll also get that. That won't be available on the Start Center, but I will show you where that is as well. Last thing is the bulletin board. Generally, the bulletin board messages that are new, there's an indicator on the navigation bar, and as a consequence, when you have one, you can click on it and see it. You can click into the details and see effectively the long description. So having it on your Start Center just takes up real estate you probably don't need. But if you do have it on the Start Center and you want to see the message again, by default, after you display it, it gets marked that you've read it, and then it's just hidden from you. So if you do need to have people be able to review a bulletin board message after they reviewed it once, but it's still active, then they'll need a bulletin board portlet on their Start Center, or they'll need access to the bulletin board application, which is, again, a business decision, effectively up to you. All right, let's take a look at a few search gems. These particularly relate to the establishment of result sets, queries effectively that you'll build that will be alterable depending on who's using it or what you're looking at or individual areas in the process. So one, for example, is searching a location hierarchy. When people have responsibility for a high-level location and all of its children, as well as the assets attached to them, in your query, rather than trying to do something custom with a wildcard, usually you can claim a high-level location and then use that effectively. The syntax that's built is pretty messy, but Maximo will build that syntax for you from the advanced search, just filling in the search location hierarchy field instead of the location field. Current day and time. In Oracle, it's sysdate, and SQL Server, it's getDate in the left and right parenthesis. And so the last 7 days, for example, would be report date greater than or equal to getDate with the parens -7. So this gives you the ability to make a query perpetual. So you can save it that way, and then it always picks up the last 7 days, or the last 30 days, or whatever you want. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, these are variables that are inherent to the database that are available to you in Maximo. Current user. Assignment of work orders could almost be another webinar. There are a lot of places where you can assign, in addition to the assignments tab. Some people use supervisor or lead. An owner group were introduced in Maximo 7. You also had work group or labor group, depending on how far back you go in Maximo. And then there's also unplanned labor. You can actually plan the individual as opposed to the craft. So there are all these places where you can identify who should get the work. And when it comes down to querying, how do they find it? And that becomes the issue. So, very often I'll see queries in an instance that relate to individual people and are all in the lead field. So we change that and we build a query that reads the current user, relates that to the lead field as it does here, and other criteria. So the light gray area is just the other criteria, in this case, approved in progress or waiting schedule work orders, nothing in history, no tasks, and the site's Bedford because I'm using a demo instance. And lead. Now, lead could just as easily be owner, and it would look for the person in the owner field instead of the lead field. And then ties that back to the current user as expressed by :user. So, yeah, I know, a structured query language, sorry, but at this level, I'm afraid you gotta pick up some of that stuff. So ultimately, this is to decrease the number of individual queries that you'll have in a given instance. And this should allow that to take place, which may mean you have one query for lead, another for owner, or another for owner group, but then you don't have to have all those individual queries. And having worked in instances where I show up and there's already a couple hundred queries in the work order tracking application, and the queries are positions just undesirable, so we try, if we can, ahead of time to get that built in, and then when we look at the application, I'll show you how that applies directly to the Start Center and result sets. Lots of icons now, not as many labels, so not as many things that you could have. You'll still have tooltips if you hover, but this is what you'll see on a navigation bar. Of course, you'll see your name in bigger letters now, and that'll actually carry through the application. Main thing I want to bring out here, the bulletin board messages. So that's an indication that there's a message waiting for you. And then, of course, you can actually click there and see what the message is. You can drill into it and see the long description. And then once you've seen it and you hit OK to close out of it, the one will go away, or should go away the next time you refresh. So you do have access to the bulletin board messages even without having the bulletin board portlet on your Start Center. So again, it's just a matter of choice as to which one you will prefer in terms of building out the Start Center. All the biggest questions around what goes into the Start Center really relate heavily to the amount of real estate you have and what people actually want to see and keep track of the information. Alrighty, so let's take a look at the Start Center design. Yeah, so I've taken the liberty of extorting this, just dramatically making the section of the screen bigger. The icons on the screen on the Start Center are pretty small, so you'll have to squint, or you can always do Control Plus and make it larger, but this is what they actually look like, which is why they're kind of a little bit distorted. First two I'll bring up, these are probably for the most part only going to be available to your administrator or administrators. Creating a new template and editing existing template. Most of your users will not actually see these. It's just a security setting. But creating a new template, obviously to build one in the first place, editing, of course, to make modifications to it, and then these templates are stored. When you apply a template to a security group, the people in that group get that Start Center. And then if you make changes to the template, you need to notify them to choose Update Start Center to bring the changes in. You cannot currently push, well, there is not functionality built in currently to push the updates. Is there SQL stuff you can do in the back end in the database? Of course there is. Do I know how to do it? No. I go to developers for that. I know where I end, and that's one of the places I end at. So it is possible to have it done, but it's not core functionality that has a push function for you to send updates to the individual user. That's where the bulletin board can come in to notify them there is an update, and then they choose Update Start Center. In terms of building out the Start Center, change layout and content allows you to specify what Portlets will display on the left side and the right side, as well as determining whether it's narrow left, narrow wide, or their even distribution. Narrow wide is probably the more common, at least that I see, but it really comes down to which is the overall preference that you have, and you have those decisions that you can make. Update Start Center when a change has been made and you've been notified. This is where you'll come to and click Update Start Center. It'll ask you, do you want to truly take the update? And you'll answer yes, and then any local changes you made will be disposed of, and then you'll get the latest version of what's in the database. Yes, if you have rights, you can still make changes after that, but there is not a way to merge changes you made with changes made from the template. So that's something to consider every time you hit this button. Now, display settings. So if you have multiple templates available to you, display settings will allow you to make choices around which of those show up. You don't have to display all the start centers that you have access to. You can choose one of those for default, and you can also specify a mobile start center so that when you use the mobile login, that's what will display. Now, again, Everyplace is provided with Maximo 7.6, and that's where this comes into play in terms of providing you with a mobile start center. I'll show you some examples of that as well, that you would more commonly use in the case of a tablet, for example. And yes, you could use it on a phone. Just grab your phone, take a look at it, and imagine a Maximo screen on that phone. You'll probably squint and think about it and say, no way. And to a degree, you'd be right. You do have some flexibility, however, when designing an Everyplace Start Center to consolidate even more of what you have that you present. We'll take a look at that as well. There may be some reasons why you would do that, but the thing to keep in mind is, in addition to having an Everyplace Start Center, you'd also want to modify, probably actually clone or duplicate an application that would be set up for Everyplace and have fewer fields on it. You're going to need some additional buttons to be present. Side navigation's going away. Some things that will then provide you with the things you really need to have on the smaller device. Again, just things to consider. All right, so side navigation, as I just mentioned it, basically just allows you a toggle so that you can effectively push the side navigation, which is essentially your historical module bar that gives you access to modules and applications. Just push it out of the way. And the rest of the Start Center real estate is then available to you for the rest of the Start Center. Typically, result sets tend to take up your real estate. Because you have the flexibility to add more fields, including more fields than you have on your list tab, sometimes these get a little unwieldy. I mean, the work order's got, a couple hundred fields on it. I don't think anybody uses those, but 16 probably, depending on the fields you put on, is where it probably will start to expand and provide you and force you into left-right scrolling. Particularly if you use a couple of description fields, like you use the work order description and maybe a failure remark. Okay, well, those two alone are probably going to cause you some left-right scrolling, depending on the descriptions that are entered. So that's something to keep in mind as well when you're choosing the fields that are going to appear on the Start Center. This one's not too terribly busy, but you have, as I mentioned, you can have multiple start centers available, quick insert, nothing here, but there's favorites for shortcuts. We've got a key performance indicator that is multiple indicators in a single graph. And again, this is the key performance graph as opposed to a list. You've got the KPI list in the lower right here, and you can see, this has a couple KPIs on it, but they're basically just take up a row apiece. The graph just tends to take up more real estate. So again, it's just something else to consider when you are managing the overall real estate and what you're actually going to put onto the Start Center. And then, of course, multiple result sets. You've got the highlighting capability based on a single field. You can alter the color of records depending on what you find in each record. Can't really do it perpetually like with the, report date -7 or anything like that. It actually does have to be a discrete value, but that discrete value can be a priority, a work type, location, status, whatever is more important for you, but you only have one field that you can do that with per result set. And of course, the workflow inbox if you have assignments, and then bulletin board. So you can make it all fit on one single Start Center, but you'll see, and there'll be more where it can get a little busy. The thing to keep in mind with these is the primary role of the person using the Start Center. So if, for example, we look at a technician, and this is probably more than they need, it may be less. We've got a couple of result sets, so work orders essentially ready, and I'm the lead person on the work order. So I log in, I run the query, and that query just happens to be on the Start Center, and it displays the work orders that are ready, whatever you identify as ready in terms of status, and maybe other criteria, and that I, the person logged in, is the lead. And then I've got another one here where ready, and a lead, some lead, is assigned. Now, I've specified here quick reporting versus work order tracking. So that basically is saying if I click on one of the records here, I'm going to go to work order tracking. If I click on one of the records in the lower portlet, I'm going to go to quick reporting. You can have individual result sets, and they're based on a query inside the application. So when you identify that in building the result set on the Start Center, that determines the application that's opened when you click on a record or a group of records or a bar if you choose to set up in a graph. So that's just something to keep in mind. You're not required to specify the application, but in cases where you have people going to different ones, it may be useful and helpful to the user. Again, just something to keep in mind when you're building and laying out the Start Center, and perhaps at different times of the day. Now, this is when it gets messier. So, finance and procurement, I merged quite a few things in here because I've got inventory control in as well. So, you have a number of result sets. We got purchase orders, and these are probably in the receiving application. Invoices and inventory. Three significantly different applications, but result sets presented that someone may need onto the Start Center all at one time, different sets of highlighting for different rules, and a number of shortcuts, financials, inventory purchasing, contracts, and then a list of reports. So you can make these, well, busy, I guess is the best way to explain it. Having a lot of information on there, and again, this all renders every time they hit the Start Center. Thing to keep in mind, result sets run a query, or in this case, run 3 queries. So result sets tend to slow things down in terms of the Start Center refreshing. And that's just, again, just something else to keep in mind, particularly around the complexity of the result set and then the overall design of the query. And that's something you want to consider when you're actually building out the query itself, because that's where the difference will be. All right, so let's take a look at the login. Maximo 7.6 has 2 login pages. The one on the left is standard login. That's what everybody's pretty much going to use. But with that, you will see a mobile login option. And if you click that, that'll bring you over to the blue login page for Everyplace. Logins don't really have much difference in them. Your same user ID, same password. get you to the same place. But in the case of the mobile login, if your Everyplace has been configured and set up, then you will typically see a Start Center more geared towards that. So site navigation's gone. It's not even an option here. Things are larger, and it's a little hard to see here. This is actually a screenshot I took from a tablet, but we'll take a look in the application and I'll show you what the differences actually appear as in terms of larger font. If you look in the application, which is also set up for Everyplace, then you'll see, again, no side navigation, not allowed on the top as well. Mostly buttons. The buttons tend to be larger to support fingers. And then the overall details in the application itself. You'll tend to have fewer columns that you'll display on the list tab. And when you look into the details of the record in the application, you'll tend to have fewer columns you display as well as fewer fields that you display for review as well as for editing within the application. So again, these are all things that you'll want to consider when setting things up for Everyplace. And of course, I think the overall design and target for Everyplace was really to support tablets and mobile devices. But several years ago when we first rolled this out, I began to see a number of individual users take to the Everyplace application as their primary application and not use the standard application. Probably more so for inventory, but sometimes for work orders as well. It's bigger. We can actually still make some of the actions that appear in select actions in the previous version or in the actions or more actions in the side navigation in 7.6 and set them up as individual buttons. So, and that makes the toolbar a little busier, but it does still provide them with some of the functionality that they would like to have and still present in a larger, bigger, bolder display. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind as well in dealing with Everyplace. All right, so yes, I thought so. Now it's time to go look at Maximo. Let's see if I can get there. Oh, look at all the stuff. Okay, well, I got there. I just logged out. Let's log back in. All right, so we're into the sandbox. First thing we should do is, this takes me to the Start Center. What I want to do is I want to specify a default application. So I'm in my sandbox. I'm going to go to Profile, Default Information, and I'm going to specify Assignment Manager, which is Work Manager, which is the leftover from version 4. So next time I log in, I'll go to Work Manager or Assignment Manager instead of coming to the Start Center. But I don't just want to go to Assignment Manager. I also want to see just my stuff. I don't want to see everything. So 1,066 work orders. No, I don't want that. I want to, let's see, where are they? View Manage Queries. Yeah, boiler work. That's what I'm responsible for. I want to set that as my default query in Assignment Manager. And I've just got the day shift, folks, so I don't have all these 81 people. So let's see, labor query. Here's my boiler team. Make that my default. I'm going to sign out and sign back in. So instead of going to the Start Center, I come directly into Assignment Manager. And instead of just seeing Assignment Manager, my default queries have been run. I see just my work orders, so the 1,000 is gone, and of course their tasks, and I see 17, my boiler team. So this is, and this is in cases where there are people who have areas of responsibility, and in this case, assignment manager is where they live at. And I use this example because I've got one. I've got at least one of these where we got regional planners. They have regional areas, so they have queries set up for the region to determine just the work that they need to see and labor that they're responsible for. So this allows them, instead of dealing with this on the Start Center, takes them directly into Assignment Manager for them to work. When I want to shut that off, go back to default information, I clear the default application, sign out, sign back in. Whoops, gotta remember who I am. Not always easy. And I'm back to Start Center. So again, as an alternative to Start Center, certainly an alternative to the blank Start Center you have if you don't have a group assigned to you. You do have that option available to you. This is actually an old feature now restored. So that's something that you have as well. All right, so as we look at Start Centers, and we'll see, let's deal with the Everyplace one. So this is the Everyplace Start Center that's just set up. The queries ready and I'm lead and open work assigned to my person group. So I have these all tied in and reading essentially who's logged in and something about that login as it relates to work orders. So I'm going to just go ahead and pop over into these work orders, open work, assigned to my person group. So what's happening here, and there are a number of these queries that are here, open work assigned to my person group, the query runs, and it has, the syntax is super messy. But essentially what happens is it figures out the resolution between the actual person group that's on the work order and the fact that I am actually in that group or in one of those groups as a user. But if you look at the actual syntax of the query, there it is, you see colon user. Now, the nice part about this is that when one morning I need to cover for someone in another group, someone comes along, usually administrator, and they go into person groups, and let's say it's the maintenance group, and I'm not a member. Oh, I'm a member of a maintenance group, so let's try engineering, not in engineering, there we go. So I'll come in engineering group, and that's it. That's all it's done. And when I come back, now I can see engineering group's work orders. Now, again, this is the power of the substitution variable in the query and the application of that to the result set. I've effectively been viced into this group or temporarily assigned or detailed or however you'd like to phrase it. And then when that assignment is over, same thing can take place. And I am no longer a member of that group. So when I go back to the Start Center, the engineering group's work orders do not appear. So the result set probably gives you the greatest amount of flexibility, and it's probably the thing I spend more time on around Start Centers because of that reason. But to avoid having to build literally 100 queries to support an organization, the substitution type variable functionality, particularly as it relates to the person and the individual user. The get date, the system date things are nice as well, but relating to the individual user so that you can set up one template that represents 40 technicians. And each technician, when they log on, they see their stuff, or they see theirs and things that they share. It all relates, of course, to how you make the assignment and is totally up to you. Now, from an Everyplace standpoint, if we look at it here, we don't have a mobile start center set up yet, so let me look at that as well. We'll go to the mobile login, and I believe we don't have anything yet. No, we don't have anything yet, so that's what you get. So on the standard Start Center, as long as the Everyplace Start Center has been established, I can then go to my display settings, where I can choose, for example, default, I want finance and procurement to appear. And mobile is going to be Everyplace. So I'll hit OK. Finance and procurement will move immediately to the first Start Center that I see when I log in. And when I go to the mobile login, now I have the Start Center that's more geared towards a mobile type device. Font's a little larger. The highlighting piece is just a matter of normal Start Center where you can choose what field, again, you want to have some highlighting take place. The thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with these, you also need to have a correspondingly organized application or set of applications also for Everyplace, so that they will then also present well on the small screen. So again, this is just normal Maximo functionality of taking in the quick reporting application and duplicating it or cloning it in older terms. The quick reporting Everyplace is just, at one point I intended a landscape and a portrait version, but technically pinch and zoom works, so you can usually manage whichever one you want simply by rotating the device. And everything works better seemingly in landscape anyway, even though I know a lot of people are probably more used to portrait. But again, this is probably the more useful way to manage this and leverage the fact that you have some mobile functionality, as long as you're connected, delivered with the application without any add-ons. It's just there, and you just need to use it. All right, let's get back to standard login. And yes, so a couple other reminders around this. I thought about doing this from a blank screen and then just building these out, and we'll never get done in the hour. So again, to change the layout and content, this is where you identify what portlets you're going to have available. The select content is where you pick the individual portlets. You've got 8 available to you, and then you choose to put them on. You can choose narrow, wide, equal width, or wide, narrow. I'll just switch this to wide, narrow, and it's just kind of a mess because I have this wide area now, and they tried to make this narrow, but they still try and make everything fit on the screen. So clearly that's not the best approach. So we'll go back to narrow, wide. Most of the individual portlets, the icon for editing, the entire series of icons actually, does not display until you hover. So just making it a more clean and crisp display, but the functionality there is still there to edit, to pick another application, and I'll just pick anything. Sign manager, it doesn't fit, but that's all right. And then that added just for me. Now, if I want to add it for all the people using the Start Center, I've then got to go ahead and choose to modify a template, make the same change, save it, and then come back and hit Update Start Center. Now, Update Start Center will bring you the most current version that's been stored in the database for that template. So my change to Assignment Manager, when I update the Start Center, should go away. And that will be what you need to keep in mind when you are taking updates in general. And we look at a result set. And actually, let me look at a different result set. Actually, let's go back over here to Everyplace. New feature that's available when you choose the application. If a report report object structure has been established, then you can leverage that because you will no longer just be restricted to just the fields in the main record. You'll have the other tables or objects that are available for that report object structure, and then you'll be able to choose fields from those individual areas. And the consequence, I believe, let's see, a location description, for example. So you'll notice there's no underscore because I can't sort on it because the location description is not part of the work order. It's drawn in from another place. So I don't have the sort capability, but I do have the ability to display it. And that is something that needs to be managed by building up the report object structure, associating with the application, and then when you build queries against it, you then have that additional feature to build in and bring in other columns from other parts of Maximo that relate to that particular record, whether it's work orders or the most popular place I actually began to see it with was inventory related portlets, because the item master information is not all that interesting for Start Center. Inventory information, however, can be, but inventory didn't have the item description. So you'd have an item number, and then you have other details. Now you have the item number and you have the item description. And this is generally more useful. So that, again, is just something to keep in mind as you're considering what you want to put on a Start Center. Make sure there's a report object structure that has been set up for that application to allow you to leverage other pieces of data from within Maximo. And let's see, one other thing here we want to look at is, you have chart options. I'll actually show that on the main screen, but then the color options are essentially where you can identify, in this case, the total cost over $20,000, said make it red. When people see this is apparently the hexadecimal presentation for red, and if you know that, that's fine. If you don't, that's okay too. Just when you're doing the navigation, make sure that you pick from here, and then Maximo will alter and come up with whatever the hex is so that that displays correctly. And I'm running out of time. Okay, so when you do have large numbers of records, you have a next page icon is going to appear on your results set. You say, yeah, I'm spending all the time on result sets, but that's where the work is. Chart options. So you can, in this particular one, set up by vendor. And you can set this up in the design, or you can set it up from the Start Center itself if it hasn't been set. And then what's going to happen when I refresh and come back to finance and procurement, I'll have chart view as an option. So then when I switch to chart view, it then charts everything by the field I chose, which was vendor. And this isn't just static data. So if I want to know the Dell stuff, so it's like there's 2 orders there, I can click on it and I'll go into the application, which in this case is receiving, and get to those orders. So it is very useful functionality from within the application itself, and again, all delivered out of the box, just the functions you need to choose what you're going to use, display them and get them set up, and then deploy through security to your individual users. And I got 10 minutes. All right, I need to do questions. So let's see, what do we have? Oh, I can barely read the questions. Can a bulletin board keep, oh, go ahead, Betsy.
I just didn't know if you would want me to, if you can Can you see them okay?
I can now.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I just realized I can blow it up. There we go.
There
All
you go.
right.
Yeah,
Can
you
the
might
bulletin
have
board?
already answered some of these during your presentation, but good to everyone
That's all
else to
right.
hear.
Can a bulletin board keep track of each person that's read or reviewed the bulletin board message? You know, technically that's got to be in a database because that's how it knows how to turn off the flag that indicates there's a number there. So I'm saying that's probably in a table. I just don't know what it is. I'll take a look at that. Everyplace, how do you configure two different start centers for one security group? Doesn't work. So the reason, I mean, you know, in theory you could do it, but in practical application, there's only one start center that you can associate with a security group. However, each user can be associated with more than one security group. So that's probably the better approach. Just build up, you know, sometimes you can even build up a group which just for the start center. And you create the group for the start center and then you associate the start center and that's all you put in it. No security rights at all. That will allow you to deploy multiple start centers to the same user. From a mobile device, though, they're going to have to pick one start center for Everyplace. They cannot have two mobile start centers configured. That is a limitation in display setting. It simply will not allow, I mean, if I pick another one, if I can actually get the okay before it realizes, yeah, it took it away anyway. I thought I was going to get an error message first if I hurried along, but it blew away my other choice and it just didn't tell me. It simply will not allow you to identify two mobile start centers. How can I hide a mobile start center from a laptop version? Oh, if you want to hide a start center, you can simply just choose no display. If you clear that check mark, like for example, I won't go too hog wild, but that's it. All those other start centers I have access to are now gone. So next time I log in, this is the only one I'll see. But I have access to display settings, and this is a real-time change. And I say, well, I want to see that one too. I hit OK, and I get my tabs back. I can toggle back and forth. So you do have flexibility to move back and forth between the settings that are established for you as long as you have control. Now, sometimes your access will not allow you to control, but as long as security rights are granted to you to make those changes, then they are essentially in the hands of each user. The bulletin board message, for example, got the indication here. Well, I'm going to go out into, I don't know, purchase contracts. And while I'm over in purchase contracts, I've got it there too. So I can click on it. There's the message, today's weather in Charlotte. That's where I am, 74, low is 49. Dress accordingly, and oh yes, thank you for attending the webinar. I hit OK, goes away. I go back to my start center, and this will refresh, and there'll be nothing there. Also, in the case where I had, and this of course we're rendering, in the bulletin board, no current messages, but yeah, I can refresh this, and of course I didn't set myself up with rights to change it, but ultimately, if you set somebody up with rights, which I didn't set up for myself clearly, they would then have access to display the individual. Actually, I should have be able to. I did. All right. So when the message is viewed, there's a yes that's indicated. So the filter is defaulted to show you no, that is message you have not viewed. So when I clear that and refresh, I get my message back. So even though Maximo knows that I viewed it, and this is why I say that there should be a table that stores the data that says that this user has viewed the message. I just don't know what it is. But again, that's something to research. But This way I can get it back. So if you do need people to be able to get back to messages, then you will need to make the bulletin board an available portlet. And let's see, anything else? I want to see mobile start learn center only in a mobile phone, and see not mobile in a laptop version. If I uncheck the display, I cannot see the start center in both versions. Okay, Alexander, I think I'm going to have to get with you offline on that one. But essentially, the controls for this, keep in mind, when you display Start Center and you say is mobile, this is mobile check mark. That is identifying the Start Center that you would see when you log in through the mobile URL. And then all the other Start Centers would be through the standard URL. And that's really what you're doing there. So a Maximo, when you come in on a mobile device, should sense that you're coming there and direct you to the mobile login if you log in from a tablet or from a phone. And of course, if it doesn't, you can always just tap the mobile login and go to the mobile login page. So you do have some control over that as well. And I'm pretty much out of time, so let's go back there because I have one more slide. And thank you very much for your time, and I'll turn this back over to Betsy.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for attending today's webinar and participating in the question portion of the end of today. If you have any further questions regarding Start Centers or Portlets, you may email me directly, and I believe I put my contact information in the question field box. So if not, you can visit projetech.com, and my information is available on our website. So this was the first webinar of the Rookie Series, and we will be sending out a recording of this webinar later this week. So be sure to register for our next webinar in the series, which will be Best Resources and Configurations for Maximo Rookies on Wednesday, November 2nd. And Tori Foley, one of our Maximo specialists here at Projetech, will be leading that webinar. And there's a link right there on your screen to register for that. If you registered for this one, you may have already registered for the entire series, so you will be receiving reminders on upcoming webinars. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day and attending today's webinar. Hope everyone has a fabulous day. Have a great day. Bye-bye.